Welcome to the Moving Forward podcast. This is, I almost said horse. It's literally in my head because we haven't made that stupid joke in a while. This is your host, Corey Cottrell. And of course, we got Rio Verdenier here.
Hey, guys.
And we got Seth Underwood. And he is the guy who runs the Dividend report. And it's fantastic. And honestly, we're just going to spend most of the episode wishing we had this guy's voice.
Thanks. I've heard that quite a bit. Yeah.
There it is. So, we obviously, we could sit here and we could talk about the Freedom Dividend for 3 or 4 hours, which honestly I would totally do. I'm always good with that. But we had the debates last night, so we figured we might as well get 3 Yang Gangers on to chat about the circus sideshow that was the Democratic debate last night, where our boy did pretty good.
I think that's fair to say.
So what?
Yeah, I thought it was his best debate yet. Honestly, I thought it was terrific.
Even if just for that the break-in line and catching Elizabeth Warren like that, the meme now where basically she's like, "Oh, I'd like to take a look at the data." He's like, "I got the data." And the way that I've been saying this for a while. Elizabeth Warren is completely totally off base with the data that she thinks that she has on automation. But I also know that she is very amenable to new data when it actually gets into her brain. So I put it out there last night, $5 to anyone who's interested. By the end of this political cycle, she's going to be talking a lot more like Andrew Yang than she is now.
I hope so. Yeah. So for those of you who didn't watch the debate, Warren at one point actually said that most jobs were lost due to trade deals and outsourcing, not automation. And of course, we know as Yang Gangers, it's exactly the opposite of that. 88% of jobs have been lost to automation and only 12% due to trade deals and outsourcing. So she had it ass backwards, as they say. But that was great, because it created a little moment of like an actual debate between Yang and Warren, a little back and forward. And then there were a couple of other places during the debate when people specifically said things like, referenced him, like my friend Andrew Yang, or as my friend Andrew Yang has said. It came up multiple times from multiple people.
Yep.
And that actually made me happier than anything Yang himself said, because it meant that he was part of the conversation and not like standing on the sidelines as in the past.
Yeah, Klobuchar had a moment that she actually addressed Andrew Yang, and she was like, "Oh well," and she actually mischaracterized what he said, and I was like, I would feel bad about this, but I'm happy that they're actually acknowledging him. Career politician having like a threat. It's Andrew Yang right there.
He's absolutely a threat, especially to the under tier, which is where almost everyone else is now. Scott Santens tweeted out this morning about the fact that it is deeply historic that we're having a debate in one of the major political parties in the United States where multiple people are bringing up UBI and multiple people are in fact for it. I started bringing up UBI on, in my, sort of media stuff, my podcast, whatever, like 3-4 years ago. And if you'd have told me that 3 years hence, we would be like many of the candidates would be talking about whether or not they were pro, let alone that they actually knew what the fuck it is in the first place. And seriously, everybody who isn't for it now basically fundamentally doesn't understand it, has never proven that they actually do. I would have said you're fucking crazy. There was no way.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that. Within the basic income community, there's long been a discussion of how do you broach the subject of basic income. Automation's obviously like a kind of a go-to. It really gets people thinking. But If you center it just around automation, we kind of saw that play out where Elizabeth Warren doesn't quite think automation's the real problem. Obviously, we disagree, but you can even say, okay, well, automation aside, we can see the very real, tangible, and concrete evidence that universal basic income is just like an economic powerhouse that should be done with or without in regards to automation. I really hoped that somehow it could go further during that discussion, but just the simple fact that we suddenly had a conversation of federal jobs guarantee and a universal basic income during the national spotlight debate, I was over the moon elated.
Yes, no, that's right. He also had a little back and forward exchange with Bernie Sanders. So 2 of the front runners had to defend their position against Yang's position. That has never happened before.
Well, he basically had back and forth with the only 2 coherent front runners.
Oh, I actually thought Biden did fine. I mean, he definitely had a few senile moments, but he came off like he knew foreign policy. And as a hawk, I'm happy to see him to take Trump to task for that. Yes.
Oh my God, I'm amazed that you can actually pull a coherent thought out of it. As far as he basically like Biden tough. I mean, I guess if that's what you really want for foreign policy, everything will be fine. That's fine. We're good.
Speaking of, they didn't ask Yang a question about China. So like last night's debate was just
solid move.
Yeah.
That's great.
So let's talk about, because we went over Yang's little exchange with Warren, which historic, super important, major exchange with Warren.
100%.
Let's talk about his exchange with Sanders. What did you guys think about how Sanders handled it, how Yang handled it? Should we like catch our listeners up with what was actually said?
Yeah, Seth, you go first, because I actually want to see if I can find a clip of that.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead, Seth. I'll just say what was said, and then you can riff on it. So, Sanders, to the best of my recollection, I was drinking a lot watching it last night. What basically said, like, we need a federal jobs guarantee. It's going to put more money in people's pockets if they actually have a job, as opposed to just getting $1,000 a month. And Yang's response, which I personally thought was great, and I'd love to hear what you guys think, was that, well, first of all, not all Americans want to work for the federal government, and that he doesn't like the idea of this kind of, he didn't use the words dystopian, I wish he had, but he kind of painted a dystopian picture of a world where everybody works for the government, which of course implies that somehow it's all getting paid for by whose taxes, I don't know, right? and then he drew this more positive, inspirational contrast with the idea of like a trickle-up economy, which he actually used the phrase trickle-up economy, where, people can actually build their local economies from the bottom up with their freedom dividend dollars. I thought that he came out looking good there.
Yeah, I actually have a lot to say about this. So like, feel free to interrupt me because I can really go on down the rabbit hole about this. But like, is okay, great. This is really central to my channel, to my entire advocacy for universal basic income. I run the Dividend Report, which is a YouTube channel, but I'm a little bit more prolific on Twitter. I've really progressed a lot in the last 10 years. I actually grew up, in high school reading Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand. I would have considered myself a conservative back then. And, I've really kind of brought a lot of the utopian types of ideological, the meritocracy, the sweat of your brow, the work ethic that Ayn Rand talked about in Atlas Shrugged. And I can see that there's like some values that you can talk about into, like the work that you get, that you reap the benefits of the sweat of your brow, all of that kind of stuff. So like, to me, I'm really grappling with this idea that work, labor, fulfillment, all of these things are really the central discussion of the fourth industrial revolution. That's what drives me with Yang so far. And it's reaching this convergence point between federal jobs guarantee and a universal basic income, which is kind of ridiculous because everyone who thinks about this can see that a universal basic income can have synchronicity with a federal jobs guarantee. You don't have to be against jobs programs. In fact, the area that I've grown up with, the TVA, especially back during the Great Depression, there are historical precedents for ways in which the federal government can help provide opportunities in places and where the economic issues are really prevalent. With that being said, the specific issues of the fourth industrial revolution and the ways that labor is consistently displaced with software in a way that we can't say, oh, well, look at the industrial revolution and try and bring that over into what's happening right now. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't to say, oh, well, let's just do this kind of thing again. And hey, let's one up it and provide a absolute federal jobs guarantee where you, your grandmother, and everyone, and possibly kids too, when they get out of school, like, it's very specific in the ways that work and resource management is kind of coded within humans to really, like, from the moment that we've been kids, we've been thinking, okay, and they've done studies on this. You look around the group, you see who's participating, and at the end of the participation, you give candy to each of the kids. If the kids see that one isn't participating, but then grabs the piece of candy, they'll suddenly start to act out to that kid. They'll shame them, they'll bully him a little bit more, because if you think about the ways that we live in small tribal societies and everything, you just couldn't survive unless everyone was doing their part. The problem is that if you consider the ways in which software, exponential technology is suddenly offloading so much productivity and providing basically this pocket of autonomous productivity, exponential productivity in the modern world, you can get into this psychological blind spot where people are being hacked into like still believing, oh, hey, resource management, givers, takers, when it really just doesn't matter in the terms of like the broad economy. this is exactly what I bring up when you've got like someone like Ninja who's playing video games and making $10 million a year. Like, what is he providing in a tangible way to the economy? He's obviously worth a lot of value, but then you consider a single mother who is having to take up 2 jobs and struggling to make ends meet. That is, to me, a very clear indication of how the valuation of what we consider tangible, valuable work is extremely off kilter. I would even go as far to say that we're already living in a dystopia, but we just don't necessarily see it. And all of this wraps around and together into this question of, okay, well, a federal jobs guarantee or a universal basic income. If you are to see the problems that I've highlighted here, then it's very clear that a federal jobs guarantee is it's kind of like a submission to the puritanical work ethic that we've all kind of brainwashed ourselves into believing. And it's highly problematic if you're highlighting the issues of the fourth industrial revolution, seeing the ways in which productivity and human labor is less and less important overall. It's very, very easy, in my opinion, for such a program to be hijacked to perpetuate these hard-coded ideas humans like to have about work and, dignity and who's providing, givers, takers. It's just it doesn't help that situation at all. So I really like looking into Yang's campaign. I supported Bernie in 2016, and man, things have really changed about my perception about him.
Same.
Are the things that I want to see talked about. It's core to my entire discussion. So that's the rabbit hole. I can go much further, but I'll probably
and this is what we do, right? And I think it's a really, really important distinction, because people are sleeping on the point that you're making as much as they're sleeping on automation. In this universe where you can have 3D printers printing 3D printers within like a large horizon from here, and a lot of the bureaucratic or repetitive work that we do very easily getting put into software, labor is becoming meaningless, and it's becoming meaningless really, really quickly, right? And to your point about dystopia, I completely agree that we are in fact already there. It's just like people like you, well, assuming that you're in the same position, like, Rio and I are exceedingly lucky. We have been for a long time, and you have to go out and find poor people, but holy shit, they're all over the place. Here in Pasco County, it's one of the largest homeless populations in Florida, right? So, and I'm friends with a bunch of bleeding heart liberals that outdo the shit out of me, who are hanging out with these people all the time. It is really a dystopia already.
Now, one of the things that I like to add on to this too is that there's like some kind of glimmer of hope in recognizing this dystopia. This is so weird. I'm struggling to put it into words in which people don't immediately disregard me, because I always bring up the fact, hey, Ninja's making $10 million playing video games. A lot of people will say, well, listen, people have made money doing silly things, or football players have made money entertaining people for millions, for hundreds of years. That kind of sector is always shown up. I'm arguing that no, this is actually where the economy is going to transition to as more and more physical manufacturing, like actual tangible productivity is automated. Humans can find value doing absolutely anything.
Yep.
One of my actual favorite books of the past 10 years was Ready Player One. It's not a very highbrow kind of book.
I fucking love that book. I don't care. It's awesome.
Okay, great. Yeah. One of the things that I wish the movie went a little bit more into detail was how he talked about that it was the most valuable economic resource in this postmodern age, where everything is done autonomously. Drones are delivering pizzas and everything like that. Suddenly, people are making money by doing player versus player PvP types of tournaments. You win the tournament, suddenly you actually have money that can go to pay your rent. And like, that seems like a wild, crazy idea, but then you turn around and you look at something like World of Warcraft, where people will sell their characters for thousands of dollars.
Yep.
Virtual real estate, like Second Life. I know it didn't take off. You can say, oh, well, this. Virtual reality and all these things are coming into their own existence, and we already trade and sell value based on ones and zeros, and that's only happening more and more and more. So, like, my idea that I like to continue to talk about is, hey, a crowd-funded economy can be facilitated by a universal basic income.
100%.
And so, like, individuals can decide for themselves what they decide value is or is not. Yeah, if we need infrastructure to be built and we can't automate that away, well, then that needs to be compensated based upon something much broader than a federal jobs guarantee that you're inclined to do because they have the money and you need the money in order to survive.
Yeah, that basic incentive structure.
Yeah, I wanted to riff on a couple of things there. part of what terrifies me as a conservative about the federal jobs guarantee, not an Ayn Rand conservative, more of a Milton Friedman type, but like the idea that that you are going to guarantee somebody a job in an economy where there's increasingly less need for labor, as you say. Basically what that means is we'll give you welfare, you could call it workfare, as long as you, quote, do a job. And at some point, it's going to be this made up, silly job, right? Corey likes to point out that Andrew Yang actually quoted, or not quoted, but paraphrased a story of Milton Friedman's about China and how like they didn't use tractors because if they had tractors then there wouldn't be anything for the guys to do. And he said, well, then why give them shovels, right? Like Bernie Sanders is talking about a why give them shovels future where we're paying people to sit around and refile papers over and over again or some stupid shit that a computer could do faster and that there's actually no need for. It's a terrible way to spend your life. And how are we going to pay for that, right? Because like, as you know, Seth, you rightly pointed out that, of course, they're not mutually exclusive. You could do a federal jobs guarantee and a UBI. But in practice, we can't afford both of them. And if you have a situation where everybody someday is working for the federal government, who's paying for it? Then you'd have the situation where the government pays you and then takes money out of your paycheck in order to pay somebody else. You might as well just go straight to communism at that point because literally they're controlling the whole goddamn economy.
It's a power hierarchy that you can easily control a large amount of people if it goes down this route. It's a slippery slope for sure.
I want to try and balance it a little bit because I think that but I'm going to come back around to exactly what you just said, Seth. When we think about huge government job programs, my go-to, we've talked about this on the podcast before. If you look at the ramp up industrially for World War II, I think that's as close an example as we have. And Bernie's so fucking old, he probably remembers what this was like. But like it worked, right? And of course, it was racially obviously not equal at all. But it really did have an effect of increasing the size of the middle class to a point that no industrialized nation has ever seen before. So like that, his incentive is good, right? Or like he means well, I guess, as far as this goes. Mm-hmm. And what he will always bring up is, we have infrastructure that's crumbling all over the country, and we have climate change, which is going to be a big deal. So we have these massive things for which labor is very potentially going to be required. So let's just promise everyone a job. Obviously, there's a huge problem with that. But like, I think that's where it comes from, right? Like we have these huge challenges. Let's, mobilize in the same way that we mobilized for World War II actually uses that rhetoric. The only problem is, to come right back around to what you just said, Seth, if it was perfectly run by a perfect Bernie Sanders in a perfect government, it is a non-zero probability that could all end really, really well. And then bring in Trump and we're all fucked.
So yeah, absolutely. And I like it. So when do you even say, let's just imagine the best case scenario here, even there, it starts to fall apart for me. So I like to run this through in my head. And I tell people, well, listen, hey, okay, maybe I've got really bad souls. I'm not going to be interested in doing infrastructure work. I'm much more of a creative type. And they'll say, oh, hey, listen, it's fine. Okay, under a federal jobs guarantee, there's going to be specific place for artists. And you can see it on his website. And he talks about that there. And I'm like, okay, great. Okay, so I'm a YouTuber. I want to make money doing YouTube. Yeah, I haven't really taken off yet, but that's what I would love to do. So will I be considered an artist under this federal jobs guarantee? And they go, well, and I'm like, okay, so let's think about this. Do I have to make a certain amount of videos? Or let's just say I'm not a YouTuber, right? Let's just say that I write haikus. I consider that art. Do you consider that art? And they go, well, and it's like, okay, so do I need to make 4 haikus a week? Do I get paid on the haiku per haiku basis? Is it really a $15 an hour job? And am I being paid the same amount as an infrastructure construction worker?
Right.
Start going into all of these like what if questions.
Right.
What if? And then again, to your point, it may be great in that administration, but you get someone who runs on a populist ideology like Donald Trump, and all of a sudden, hey, this federal jobs program is going to be strictly narrowed, and you guys are all going to be building a wall.
Well, and white people only.
Oh, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it's determining work based on what this power hierarchy decides that it is, instead of the individual. And like I said, that's where really come from in the past 10 years is I still hold the truth that I think that people know what's best for people themselves.
Yeah, to take it back to the debate, Yang actually specifically addressed Corey's point. He said, look, in principle, I'm for the idea of guaranteeing everybody a job, but we have to ask ourselves, like, how it's going to play out in reality. And then he kind of obviously didn't have as much time in the debate to go into the detail that Seth just did, but he touched on a lot of the same points, I thought, fairly well considering the time constraints. So what are some other like standout moments in the debate that you guys liked? Because I'm trying to remember the other people who mentioned him. It was at least 3 others who said something along the lines of my friend Andrew Yang, and that was just, it was very, very, very nice for me to see. I also thought it was cool that Yang gave Fred a shout out, who was on the show, episode 24. He was asked about like a friend that people wouldn't expect. And he said, well, one guy who stands out is this guy named Fred, who's a trucker. And I spent a couple days with him in his truck, and he was a former Trump voter. And now he's like volunteering for my campaign and wrapped his truck with my logo and crowdfunded it and all of this fun stuff. So that was really cool that he gave Fred a shout out too.
Immediately people like pundits were saying, oh, I don't know if this Fred guy's real or not. And it's like, come on.
We were all pointing at him. No, he's right there.
Yeah.
I'm visiting my mom. I'm visiting my mom down in San Diego area right now, and she was watching the debate with me, and she's like, Fred, oh yeah, that guy, he calls you on the phone randomly every now and then, doesn't he, Rio? And I was like, yeah, he does.
That is really cool. I can only imagine what he felt like in that moment where his name, like on national television, that is absolutely amazing. That moment also when Tulsi came through for Yang, that was a highlight for me. A huge moment. I don't know if it's good or bad in the wide like span of things, but he had someone defend him on that stage where otherwise he wouldn't have. That was huge.
Yeah, and again, for the listeners who didn't watch the debate, what Tulsi said was, I think Andrew Yang is right, that we need a universal basic income. And, you know, that I've actually adopted that as something that I support in my campaign now, too. I thought that was wonderful.
Well, and Buttigieg kind of, like, he sort of hints at it when he's not being I think Buttigieg really disappointed me yesterday. I feel like a really good start. And then he was sort of like individually targeting people for gain when he wasn't being like the epitome of a corporate Democrat, which was also super gross.
I like him.
Yeah, no one's shocked. No one at all is shocked.
I just worry that he couldn't possibly win the general election being gay and all. I mean, unfortunately, it's hard. I think he and Warren would probably lose to Trump, sadly.
You think
not
so?
Not because of their policies or because they're bad candidates, because they're women and they're gay. Americans don't like people who let men put penises inside them.
That makes me sad.
Yeah, I would hope that's
true.
Not
though.
true.
Misogyny is still deep in our culture, man. It's not good.
Yeah, I would like Hillary Clinton won.
Oh yeah, no, she won the general election.
Right.
Sorry, she did not win the electoral college.
Right.
That's the thing, is like there are a lot of these swing states that are, you know, a lot of like working class, blue collar,
but they were all
like
close.
Blue dog dim types, and
Right.
they don't share our liberal values when it comes to social issues.
Right, and I'm not saying that isn't a problem, and I'm not saying that a woman candidate's not gonna have to be twice as good as a male candidate. I think that's just a fact.
Well, I guess that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that there's no way a woman could win, but I personally, like, I mean, if you look at the data, Warren loses to him in the polls, you know?
Not
Or at least
all the time.
within
And
a
I think-
margin of error, even if she wins.
Well, and that scares the shit out of me. That's and I think you're right. I think the only way that you that needle gets threaded is by the fact that misogyny is still a thing, which is
And then if you try, you have to take into consideration the advantage that the Republican Party has in the Electoral College too. So if you're within the margin of error, forget it.
So like policy aside, but here's the question that I'm wondering about right now. Do you think that policy, or like, for instance, Bernie and Yang have a huge percentage of Republicans who would vote for them. Do you think that it's more likely that someone who would describe himself as being a socialist would be able to win than like you said, someone who misogynists will rally against?
I mean, that's the data.
I was going to answer that really quickly.
Yeah, I know, but I wanted to get the data in before you start screaming about how socialism is bad.
But Corey, that's so funny, because that's not what I was going to say. What I was going to say is, as somebody who despises socialism and for whom Bernie Sanders is my absolute last choice, I think the data is in, and that he would have a better chance of winning than Warren. Absolutely.
Well, thanks for stealing my whole point.
No, now you can. I just wanted to get it in before you assumed about me, sir.
I will rant and just say that Rio is right about what he just said.
What do they say about assuming making an ass out of you and me?
It works. It works. I just tried it. I can attest.
My personal optimism is that, like, if we can get through the economic problems, if we can reach like a place where this country kind of like gets on its feet, ideally with a universal basic income, that's how we can start uniting people more on a social front.
I agree.
And really getting closer to a place where that's not true, where a gay president's not out of the question because of the fact that he is gay or this or that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Yang makes that point brilliantly. I wish he would make it more in the debates, but he's starting to get a chance to talk, so maybe it'll come up in one at some point. Yeah, he talks about the fact that like you have to get people out of a mindset of scarcity, and then all of a sudden they care a lot more about things like human rights and climate change.
Mm-hmm.
They have the intellectual bandwidth to do it, right? Like I love the study that he brings up, which is accurate. Right? If you're worried about bills, your IQ drops like a whole deviation point or whatever it is. Basically saying like, if you're poor, you're kind of dumb. Dumb, not dumb, just dumb.
You know, somebody who doesn't like you is going to take out just that one clip, right?
No,
and play it out of context.
Do it. That's how I'll know I've arrived. There's data on that, right? And you know, it's not hard to understand why that is. If you're constantly in a stressing situation, you know, if you have cortisol racing through your system all the time, you don't have time to wax philosophical on podcasts for 5 hours a day or whatever. Like that's how correlates. It's really not hard to see why that would happen. But with a basic income, and we always talk about this, but I don't think it can be stated too much. When everyone is getting $1,000 a month, local economies are going to go bananas, right? So it's not just that $1,000 a month in any way, shape, or form. You know, the opportunities in those areas are going to be lifted as well, to the point where you know, we really could see this situation, this resurgence of a comfortable middle class, and that's really all it is, right? Like, we don't want everybody to get like super rich. That's not going to happen. But just take the stress off of everyone. To his point, take the boot off everybody's neck, and we'll start to see people actually start reaching out to their neighbors again and having that time to start thinking about how to be better neighbors and have a better society.
Yeah, this goes back to the point I was making about like the psychological blind spots that can like self-perpetuate these problems that we're dealing with. Is that, you know, it's been shown people get into this tribalistic mindset. They're so much less likely to point to the fact that it's like, oh, well, my issues are being caused by these crazy exponential autonomous functions of productivity. Oh no, it's clearly those people who are not like me.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think we are all in agreement that Yang did pretty well in the debate. I think his total word count, I don't know if we've seen it yet, but it's got to be twice what it's ever been before. And the fact that other people were talking about him is amazing. So what do we think? Are we hopeful that, like, could this be his moment to really like fully stand out from the rest of the lower tier? Because, you know, and he, like, I think it was Business Insider made him, like, put him in fourth, like the fourth most likely to become the nominee, which I thought was terrific. That was based on an analysis of a lot of things, not just his polling numbers, which in some cases are great. He was pulling ahead of Kamala Harris in her home state of California. That's no minor thing.
That's insane.
But yeah, like, I mean, the way I look at it is really, honestly, for Yang to be a viable candidate, he needs to come in at least third in one or hopefully both of the first two primary states. So what do you guys think about the debate in terms of how it helped him do that? And I guess also the rest of the candidates, like, who do you think came out ahead of where they were before, and who do you think has probably lost ground?
So we're all in agreement that the debate went well for Yang, but based just upon what I have been paying attention to today, he has not been spoken about nearly as much as he was after the last debate. I was listening to NPR. They did not mention him once in the political analysis. Like, he is just nowhere to be seen in any of the post-debate discussions. The media continues to shaft him, and it's very, very clear. And as long as he's dealing with that problem, my contention is with his position as opposed to Bernie, because Bernie's already that person who the media is shafting. So, like, Yang has to almost deal with that as well in a way. Like in 2016, I felt the same way about Bernie. Like, oh, well, why are they not talking about him? Why are they giving him this treatment? Now Yang's in the same boat with Bernie. That doesn't help him whatsoever. He needs to have some kind of consistent amount of coverage so that more of these primary states can see him. And however we get there, I'm not too sure. I want to be optimistic about it,
Right.
given how well he turned out.
What about if he were to, really, and I know he's doing this to some extent already, but really organize like on the ground volunteers and even staff if he can afford it, in Iowa and other places. And like, what about like New Hampshire? Like, what if he went there and did lots and lots of rallies leading up to it? I mean, I'm hoping he's planning on doing that. That could help.
Yeah, I mean,
could he get on local television in the area?
Maybe.
Run lots of ads as well on TV. I mean, like there are ways you can do getting around the media, and I like to defend the media because I do tend to think that people overemphasize like that there's some kind of great conspiracy or whatever, and most of the time the media is just motivated by trying to make money, and they're not actually all that bright. It's kind of like conspiracy theories about the government. I'm like, dude, they can't figure out how to like fix the potholes in your neighborhood. You think they could like take down the Twin Towers? Give me a break.
Yeah. Never ascribe to malice what can be explained by
that
incompetence.
said, you're right, Seth. I mean, considering he had such a good debate and that it was head and shoulders above his other debates, like why on earth aren't they talking about him? That is suspicious.
I mean, the scary thing is like Trump says the dumbest, most asinine shit you could possibly say in the English language, and that's what worked for him.
Yeah.
Right.
That's how he got coverage,
That's exactly it. Right. And again, your favorite buddies over at Morning Joe. Honestly, like they're perfectly anti-Trump now, which is fantastic. But Trump was calling into that show every fucking day, right? And they just ate it up because it was great for ratings. So if they all were burnt at the stake, that would only be
a lot of it does
too
come
aggressive.
down to ratings. Like what can Yang do to make it so that he's good for ratings?
Right,
like, he needs
but
to be
then
better at playing the media. He could learn from Trump on that one.
Well, but then also not be he can't go off brand though either, right? So like he's got to have that capacity to come in and say something that will basically get attention, but isn't like, "Hi, look at me, I'm a drunk clown."
Like ideally, so for instance, I mean, the Nobel Peace or Nobel Prize winners just recently were actually they won on the basis of the work they've done to eradicate global extreme poverty. And one of them went as far as to say, and they said this during an NPR segment, they asked her about it, and she said, I believe that the practices that we have been succeeding in need to be adopted in Western countries, in the first world, not just the extreme poverty. So I'm sitting there going, these are the people who are pioneering basic income outreach as what they're doing to eradicate poverty. Surely there's going to be something said about universal basic income in this NPR segment, and possibly link that to a presidential candidate who's running, which is exactly the type of thing that our news should be doing. They didn't mention it once. And like that is something that I think would be great for ratings. I mean, 2 years ago, CNN was running all these headlines saying, oh, wow, universal basic income could possibly put this much money in the economy. As soon as we have someone running on the idea, boom, silence.
Yeah, and I was actually kind of surprised that Van Jones didn't say more about him, because he was like out of the closet as Yang Gang, and after this last debate, he was all about Pete.
Really? Huh. Well,
yeah, I don't know. Maybe his bosses said like, "Hey, we want Pete." I don't know. Like I'm gonna reiterate. I really am super skeptical about conspiracy theories. I don't think that like all of the media collaborates on a single thing, but I do think that I mean, as somebody who publishes a magazine myself, like I talk to my editor and I say like, look, that's not our message. We're not going to publish that piece. We're going to publish this piece. We've got an angle. We got it's propaganda. Like we're in the propaganda business. This is about like our board wants us to spread a specific message and not another message, and that's just all there is to it. And so it's not. It doesn't even have to be a conspiracy. It could just be the fact that a lot of rich, powerful people happen to have similar interests.
Well, we're seeing the conglomerate of 100 little decisions that all show that there is corporate interest at a corporate-owned media outlet, and no one is shocked.
Who would have thought?
I know, it's super weird. And yeah, just that part is what it is. And I like the fact that unlike Tulsi, who complains about it, there's no sense complaining about it. It's not going to get you, anything except for, oh, look, you look like a whining Republican. Not that they're professional victims. Just kidding. They totally are.
Well, it is hilarious to watch Trump and Trump supporters talk about how the media screwed him over. I mean, they gave him billions of dollars worth of free advertising during the general election. He absolutely could not have won without the complicity of the corporate media.
So
that's right. Yeah. Well, with that being said, to the question you asked about where is Yang's path, where
Right.
does he go from here? What's the best look? I try to like tread this line between unbridled optimism and naivete when I realize, Yang is approaching his campaign from the startup mindset. Every single decision that his campaign has made up to this point has been one that a business person, trying to create a successful startup would take. And he's been very upfront and clear about that. And he's done the math. He says, listen, these are the numbers that we have to hit in Iowa. These are the amount of turnout we need in the caucus. We understand that. So I like to put a little bit of faith inside of that campaign while recognizing these things we're talking about and saying they've got their pathway. They know what they need to do, and they're making the steps towards that. It's good to have faith in that.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was actually more or less what I was going to say. Like when you look at the numbers moving up in a geometric fashion, right? Looking back at other candidacies, we start to get concerned at this time or whatever. But at this time, back in the race, Rudy Giuliani was the lead in the Republican field, right? Like that once before the voting starts, none of this matters. And Iowa and New Hampshire, never mind the media. I think you're totally right that if we focus specifically, and presumably, well, we know that he's been doing that to some small extent or another, going out wide when they need funding and started, building the grass fires that turn into forest fires, that kind of thing. To Rio's point, if we manage to hit third, if we knock out one of the top three candidates in one of the first two races, suddenly the media has a harder time ignoring him. I mean, honestly, that's what happened with Obama, right? Obama was like the really inspirational kid. Oh, isn't he cute? Hillary Clinton's going to win. And then he wins New Hampshire and everyone was like, wait, what? Like I was that way. Suddenly it was a real plausible thing moving forward. And Bernie Sanders experienced exactly the same thing in 2015. Then what?
Yeah, no, I'm just I want to reiterate, elaborate on a point that Seth made, which is that Yang's really playing the long game here, right? And it seems to me his strategy is to stay ahead of the minimum requirements to stay in the debates, because that seems to be the standard for having the media at least acknowledge you're still running, shout out to Tom Steyer, who finally got on the debates.
And honestly, he overperformed as far as I'm concerned. And now, granted, my bar was set really low, but
I thought he did great. And yeah, I guess we should talk a little bit about how some of the other people did. But still on Yang here for a second. He is doing the long game, and if he can stay ahead of the minimum requirements in the debates, and then I guess you could make an argument that if you've got limited funds, you want to make maximum impact per dollar, you're going to wait until the last month or so before the first primary to start really spending money and throwing all of your volunteers into Iowa or wherever. So that makes sense. Maybe that's what he's doing. I hope that's what he's doing. I don't know. He is possibly, you could make an argument for being in fourth place. And at this point, honestly, the nominee could be Pete Buttigieg. I thought he did okay. Especially if Biden and or Sanders had to back out, it's still kind of anybody's game, not anybody's game, but out of the top six front runners, maybe throw Kamala in there, maybe Julian Castro, maybe even Amy Klobuchar. I thought that she might have actually had a breakout moment in the debate. She's been stuck at 1%, and she had four more conservative Democrats like myself. She got our attention. We were like, oh, okay, we've got an alternative to Joe Biden who's less senile.
I've actually got a relevant right in front of me here. This is from Zach Montalaro from the Political, reporter for the Politico, excuse me. He says 2/3 of the Democratic presidential field ran a deficit last quarter, spending more than they took in. Here's so-and-so on why that matters. Then he follows up and says, I think the field's divided, monetarily at least, into three groups: cash positive, in the red but with a cushion, and in the red and running out of money. The first group is self-explanatory. Candidates can keep doing what they're doing and even expand. That's Warren, Sanders, Buttigieg, and Yang. So,
yeah, I'm gonna go.
So
again,
so which
right?
So was Biden in the second category? That's interesting. I guess he just kind of assumes the money will just keep coming.
Yep.
Second group is those who spent more than they raised would have a cushion, like Biden and Harris, and maybe Booker. What do you mean maybe? Won't be forced out due to money anytime soon, but they can keep their pace with the cash positive campaigns, ? Can the run sustained ad campaigns or get more field staff. And the last is those who spent more than they raised with a dwindling bank account. Castro certainly, but I think I'd put O'Rourke and Klobuchar here as well. They can't afford to run big deficits. Something's got to give. Fundraising needs to increase. Cuts needs to happen, or ... It ends.
That's a good point. Like maybe Klobuchar would have to actually like capitalize on her strong debate performance and raise a lot of money. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I wouldn't have called her debate performance.
Well, no, because
but then she's not talking. She's not talking.
Yeah,
to me,
she wasn't
right?
talking to you. But.
Yeah. So I get it. I totally get it. I was thinking about this too. Like, I'd love to get your guys' take on this. I have a suspicion, and I'm willing to put virtual money on it, that Biden's going to be the first of the top 3 to drop out, and that the funding situation only speaks, even more strongly to that, assuming that Bernie doesn't go have a fucking heart attack again, which is is a non-zero probability.
He was strong last night.
He really did like that. I feel like Bernie had the best night of anybody who was on that stage last night. But what do you guys think? Who in the first the top 3? Who do you think is going to drop out first?
I don't know. I'm probably Biden, just because he's a gaffe machine and he is dealing with this whole thing with his son, which apparently has absolutely no basis in fact. But then, something like half of Donald Trump's voters believe that Hillary Clinton is running a child sex rink out of a pizza parlor. So they'll believe that he's probably got 100% of his morons believing that Hunter Biden is an evil crook.
Yeah.
For by the way, accused of doing a tiny fraction of the stuff that Trump openly admits his family is doing.
Yeah, I mean, there was always the sort of implied corruption there, right? At the end of the day, Hunter Biden was getting $50,000 a month from a Ukrainian, probably at least partially itself corrupt. They all kind of all are, because they're all sort of pseudo connected to Russia at some point or another, for a natural gas company. And it's not a good look. Did they do anything illegal? No. But at the same time, this is exactly the same corruption that, a lot of us very realistically and justifiably hate Trump and his family for.
Yeah, exactly. I think Trump's strategy there is basically to continue to give his reluctant supporters permission to keep supporting him, right? Because if it's difficult to criticize Trump for corruption if you have persuaded people that some people in your own family have done the same thing, which again, not a good look, little sleazy business maybe, but like a drop in the bucket in comparison to the corruption that the Trump family is doing. But that doesn't matter, because like the whole point is he wants to be able to empower his reluctant voters to be able to say, what about? He just needs the false equivalence, right? He needs the one tiny example that, whether true or not, looks true enough that dummies will believe it when he says something completely ridiculous about it. And we know that there are a lot of those. They exist. And it's the same thing as like all politicians lie. I mean, how many times have we heard that from Trump supporters? Like if you took literally every lie from every politician in the last 500 years, they would not have lied as much as Trump in the last 2.
And this segues into the other question of 2016 was the year where the progressive turnout really made an impact. And we had this entire dichotomy of Hillary and Bernie. That's still there. The establishment would love to believe that it still has the power, and it's trying to make it seem like 2016 just never happened. But to some degree, the pundits and the polls were just flat out wrong. They did not account for many, many variables. And I still think that to some certain degree, that still exists when we're asking the question about, establishment versus progressives in the race right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a conservative pro-establishment Democrat, I'm not sure I actually agree with that. I think that if you look at, yes, it's true that the progressive turnout mattered in primaries in blue states where you guys had a lot of victories and got more progressive candidates elected, which is, kudos to you for that. But I think that what made the difference in the House and stuff was that Trump turned off a lot of traditional Republican voters, like suburban moms and people like that. He has alienated a lot of conservatives because of his trade wars and his kind of backing away from our strong foreign policy position that's actually been bipartisan for a long time. And that's part of his appeal with his base. But with college-educated, affluent Republican voters in the suburbs, he was not doing great, especially with women who just find him personally revolting, frankly.
So that group, are they the ones that are more likely to be sympathetic to Bernie Sanders in the data that we've seen? Do we know that?
I can't say about that in terms of the data. What I have noticed about Bernie Sanders supporters is that they tend to also be Trump supporters most of the time. They don't tend to be like, I don't meet a lot of Bernie Sanders people who are also like, yay, go, Mitch McConnell, like, or Republican establishment types. I don't see that very often.
The common factor here is
they both have a populist appeal, and a lot of Trump voters are left-leaning economically, not necessarily as well informed as Bernie Sanders left-leaning voters are, but they don't seem to be a lot of establishment Republican types in the Sanders camp.
Here's what I would just really like to see is that, and I think Donald Trump affords us an opportunity to incentivize this in a way that a normal race wouldn't incentivize it. As Democrats, we need to be able to, because we're running in this Democratic Party or whatever, there's progressives, there's like corporate down centrists, whatever you want to call them, Rios. We have the opportunity
Rio
to build
Republicans.
Rio Republicans. We have an opportunity to build a coalition ticket. I still am of the firm opinion that if she'd brought Bernie Sanders on, or if we'd accepted, we don't know how that all worked out. If they had decided to build a coalition ticket, Trump would have lost by 10 points.
Oh, absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah. Because Sanders would have brought on all of those like swing states that barely helped Trump eke out a victory.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of those blue collar, like those types, they like Sanders, and they also like Trump. Unfortunately, they don't like him as much, but they like him. And so it was absolutely stupid for Hillary Clinton to choose Tim Kaine instead of Bernie Sanders.
Who?
Just
kidding.
Oh, right. Yeah. I thought I misspoke for a second. Then I was like, oh, yeah, he's just so forgettable.
Every time I have to make that joke every time because it works.
Oh, Lordy. Yeah, no, I mean, who knows? Maybe she offered it to him and he said no, in which case, screw him too, right? But like, yes, they should have worked out their differences for the better of the country. I completely agree.
Yeah, I hope that however this season breaks down, that they figure something like that out. That's why I love like the Tulsi Yang ticket thing. Hard no. Like, she's not that interesting anyway, and it skips the idea that we actually have to knit together a much larger coalition to make sure that we're not within the margin of error. Because you're right, if we're in the margin of error, we have to assume we're going to lose because Russia's going to be fucking with the whole thing again, and the 9 other reasons why the polls have the capacity to hit outside or near the margin of error, which means a loss.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it's really funny to see Trump supporters saying like, "Oh, the pollsters got it wrong." Actually, they did it right. Like, and the outcome of the actual like popular vote was pretty much right what you would expect based on the polls. They just weren't. They should have been polling within swing states. Duh.
Particular
That's all that matters.
Swing states. Yep.
That's all that matters.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yepers. All right. Well, Yang 2020.
I wanted to say something about Tulsi. I agree with you, Corey. I actually personally like her. I think she seems like a straight shooter. She looks great on camera. She would be a really strong VP candidate for somebody other than Yang, possibly. And despite the fact that I disagree with her on foreign policy. But that said, she wouldn't be a good VP candidate for Yang because there's too much overlap between Yang supporters and Tulsi supporters. Like he needs to bring somebody on who's going to get like the Biden vote. We want to get the boomers back in there or something like that. You got to bring in somebody has to bring something new to the coalition. And a lot of people have a hard time dealing with that because it means that it's going to be somebody who probably don't like all that much, right? Because by definition, they're going to be different from your guy. Yeah. But that's just politics.
Yeah.
Yang Warren ticket.
Yeah.
That's not a bad.
100%.
I'd be okay with that.
Yep. Or even Yang and Stacey Abrams. I've literally had, sorry, I have to say this out loud, wet dreams about that. That's just, both my nipples are hard right now.
Lord,
just thinking about
now
it.
I have to have that image.
You don't have to, but you do. No. It's so funny too.
All three of you in the room, man.
God damn! I had this really good point about intellectual biases, but I had to take it there. I'm sorry. What are you gonna do?
So another big thing too, leading out of the debates, one of the things that Yang has really been relying on are the things extra debate, what he can do outside of it to garner as much attention, given that he's going to get the lowest amount of speaking time. So this time around, we've seen, hey, Friday, he's going to have Ask Andrew. That's his big thing that he's aiming towards. Do you guys think that this is going to be as effective as past things? I don't think anything's going to be able to beat his giveaway that he did in the second debate, but I'm hoping that this can really push him forward.
I personally hated the giveaway, and I have to say I was wrong. Like it paid off. It worked for him. Yeah, I don't know. I think asking, giving. I think there's a certain segment of the population, especially of the kinds of people who watch primaries, who would probably really appreciate that. Who would say like, yeah, I appreciate that. Like he's making himself available to answer our questions. You know, it's a lot better than being evasive, which. However you feel about Elizabeth Warren, she was very evasive on that.
She really was. That's a huge turnoff for me. I think he's leaning into Twitter power, right? Like to your point, Seth, about talking about being a startup, he's recognizing what his strengths are. His strength is not trying to figure out how to commandeer earned media. His strength is he started a grass fire online that is spreading. So how do you do that? Pour gasoline on it. Which is what this is, right? Like if you're having the ability to reach out to, thousands potentially, if not hundreds, at the very least hundreds of people that have all these questions, your campaign's out there answering these questions all the time. You're making yourself available for what ends up being, because he'll go in to do an event in Iowa for 200 people. This will be for like 100,000, right? And it's got the long tail capacity of creating tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet after tweet. He'll be trending that whole day, and that again is another one of the secret sauce things that the Orange Menace has been sadly really, really good at. So I think it's brilliant. He's leaning into what he's very, very good at because he's got answers to all these questions.
Kudos for your pyro metaphor, man. You went for it. Pour gasoline on that fire. Yeah, no, you're right. He's leaning into his strengths, and I mean, the media is not really giving him any other options. Although, we should point out when he does get good coverage. Not surprisingly to me, and I guess probably doesn't surprise Corey anymore, since he had me on his show to talk about the conservative case for UBI. He's getting really good coverage in a lot of the elite conservative press. Forbes has done some excellent articles on him.
Yep.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, I think it's the lefties who are going to try to sink his campaign. Now, for like no matter how you feel about either side, I think that's just seems to be true. Like, even Fox News gives him better coverage than MSNBC.
Yeah, I was not prepared for the main opponents of Yang to really be from the left. I was just thinking about this. Yeah. It's like you can talk to like a more right-leaning individual and say, listen, all right, well, here's the basics of the freedom dividend. I know it's a crazy idea, but let's talk about it a little bit. And like they may not leave convinced, but they'll go, you know what, you've really kind of expanded my mind here a little bit. This seems like a thing that I would look into a little bit more. But like with that group of like more leftist individuals, they will just not get away from this thing of like, listen, okay, I love the idea of a universal basic income, but it is the system. The system is just not going to allow this to work ever. I don't necessarily have any data or evidence to back that up with, but I am not going to move from my position and believing that that's just not.
Yeah, down with capitalism. That really is. That's what we're fighting with. There,
lack of trust has just shut them right down, which is sad because the UBI would totally increase their trust.
Yeah. Oh, well, 100%.
Yeah, but I've had the same experience. Like, the number of people that, and again, like people bring this to me, like, can you explain why this Bernie Sanders supporter is like, well, even Robert Reich today, who I agree with like 99.9% of the time, came out and said, Yang's idea of a UBI is great, but he wants to get rid of all other social programs. Like, A, not true, like at all. And B, not fucking true. Like that, it's crazy that you would have this opinion on this.
Meanwhile, people supporting a federal jobs guarantee are using as one of their arguments that it'll make welfare irrelevant.
Yeah.
Like that, so that's completely illogical. I mean, either you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think we should make welfare irrelevant. I would prefer we do it via UBI, not a federal jobs guarantee. But Corey, like you pointed out, Yang's not even doing that because he's giving people an option.
Right. Like it comes down to...
Whereas the federal jobs guarantee could literally say, like, look, if you qualify for a job and you don't take it, you don't get welfare.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's a huge point. The idea that all he's really doing is saying that if welfare or whatever situation you have right now is better than this for you, keep it. Yeah. If it's not, you get this better thing that's going to be a hell of a lot more than what Elizabeth Warren said last night about stay-at-home moms, which is that we'll give you $200 extra a month when you're fucking old.
Yeah.
Right? It just And I go back to this because Warren, who I don't mind at all, like she was actually my first pick before I knew who Bernie Sanders was in 2015 or whatever. The work that she's done with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is legit, extremely well-meaning, went and did a bunch of really, really good things. Never mind that the Republicans are gunning it from the inside now. See, as example, federal jobs guarantee if they pass that. But she's literally trying to solve every single one of the problems that she has perfect data for from 1998.
Yeah, 100%. What crushes me the most is just how patronizing this group of individuals seem to be. Like, they aren't even interested in a person who's going to say, no, listen, I mean, like, I've been affected by welfare administrations. I would freaking love anything but this. Please, please, like, acknowledge me, acknowledge what I'm trying to say here. No. I know what's best for you. I know what's best for you.
I used to think that was a Republican talking point that wasn't real, and I can't anymore. Because it's just and talking to my buddy Greg, he's been on disability, is a perfect example of why universal health care is an absolute necessity. His life was completely and totally destroyed by having multiple heart attacks, which statistically can happen, right? So now he's completely and totally poor, has been for a long time, is never going to pay off his medical debt, and experiences in real time what it's like to go out and try and do some work, and then because he went and did some work, now he makes less money, right? Like, it's literally, he is disincentivized to go and do that. He does it anyway, he's working with his mom, but he's experiencing that in real time. Just ask him, like, would you rather have the freedom dividend? And there's no question whatsoever.
So I feel like Yang had a missed opportunity that we might be fruitful to point out. Although, he may not have had a chance given the rules of the debate. But when Warren did that thing where she was asked multiple times a straight yes or no question, will you raise taxes on the middle class? She made what is a completely valid point, which is that costs will go down for most people. But she wouldn't do what Bernie Sanders did. And Bernie Sanders made her look bad. That was a good moment for him.
100%.
Because he was like, look, I'll straight up say it. Like, taxes are going to go up on the middle class, but they're not going to pay premiums and deductibles and all this stuff, so they're actually going to save money. And that was respectful. As somebody who disagrees with Sanders about most things, I appreciated that he was honest about that, right? And I think it made Warren look bad that she wasn't honest about that. So I think that whole conversation was an opportunity, and I don't remember, they may not have even asked Yang about Medicare for All, so maybe that's why he didn't say it.
I don't think they did.
But like, if he had, it would have been wonderful for him to, again, engage more as part of the conversation, which is something he did very well in this last debate and didn't in previous. I thought it was great. He could have said, like, look, I also support Medicare for All. Taxes are going to go up slightly for the middle class. But not only are they going to save money on premiums and deductibles under my plan, but I'm also giving the middle class massive tax relief in the form of the freedom dividend. So your taxes de facto are also going to go way down to lower than they've ever been, in your lifetimes. If that would have been great. Like, wait a minute. You're saying not only am I going to save money on healthcare, but you're actually going to lower my taxes? That would have been a good line.
Yeah, it's a way to thread that needle so people actually understand what it is. And I'd love to see later on, and I hope that we cut the number of people in the debate stage by at least half for eventually. But he's got that ability to say that corporations are getting subsidies for generations. We just want to subsidize Main Street. Like, literally everybody, all of you, and everybody in the middle class gets a tax break, and there you go. So it's not this ubiquitous, just universal basic income that people don't understand. You can actually start speaking the language of multiple different sectors of the electorate to the point where they're sort of forced to entertain the idea as a thing that can actually work in the world.
Yeah,
I think he might be. Sorry, go ahead, Seth.
Oh, yeah. I've noticed that this is where pundits start to actually pick up. For instance, he did a wonderful job, the very first question he was given, of being able to tie all of these things that they've always been talking about, that they keep talking and rehashing over the debates, and then bringing it right back to the economy, to the individual person. Like, this is how it's going to affect you. That's what you care about. I don't care how intelligent you may be. You know what is going to happen to you. And that's where his personal strength lies.
Agreed.
Yeah, I wonder if he might be holding back the whole argument about tax relief for the middle class for the general election, or maybe even for later in the primary. Like, if he was running, if it comes down to him v. Warren or him v. Biden, that's just going to be a devastating argument against them on his part. And then same thing with Trump. Trump's going to say, you're going to make their taxes go through the roof. No, I'm not. I'm actually going to lower them more than you did. He's got that up his sleeve.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have to be careful, though, because you will have, like, the Associated Press, which, God bless them, they called out Warren on the fact that she got the whole thing on automation wrong.
They did.
Right? Technically, they could say, actually, Yang's plan is not going to lower your taxes. So he has to be careful and explain that what he what he's really going to do is he's going to give you tax relief, and most people are going to be getting as much or more back from the government every month than they pay in. So de facto, your taxes are going down or dropping to zero. So he has to be careful about the way he says it, which unfortunately in a political environment where if it doesn't fit on a bumper sticker, people have trouble following it. It would be nice if he could just straight up say it's a tax cut, but tax relief, that's a pretty good bumper sticker. I could get behind that.
The short distance that people just jump from, oh, wow, Yang UBI to Milton Friedman. And, like to say tax relief, they could easily say, see, he's all about blah, 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 this. That might be some of the restraint that he's showing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that might be why he's waiting for the general, because in the Democratic primary, that might not play so well for him. But in the general election, he would win hook, line, and sinker on it.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
All right. So any final words, Seth? Anything where can our listeners find you? Anything else you want them to know about you? Anything that you want to say about the debate that you didn't get a chance to say because I was too much of a loudmouth?
No. This has been great. I mean, I love the content that you guys have been producing, and I'm so happy that you have me on your show. I think, the bipartisan lens that you've approached this with, God, we need so much more of this in our, whether it be political or not. It's how this country will move forward. That's the name of the podcast. Great. So all of these things, like I said, listen, I'm from a deep South state. My father, super conservative. That's how I was reading Ayn Rand. I think that there is so much growth that is happening in this space, and with content creators, the more that you guys kind of will reach out to people and do these policy analysis. I love it. I absolutely love it. I think we covered really a lot. There may have been one or two things, but I just can't think of it right now. I do run the Dividend Report that you can go and check me out on YouTube. I'm a universal basic income advocate. I'm a futurist. Avid video gamer. I love virtual reality, and I'm going to talk about all of these things, but I'm a little bit more prolific on Twitter. You can follow me at Dividend Report on Twitter. And, anytime that you guys want to have me back on the show, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, we're going to have you back. I feel pretty strongly about just being unilateral there.
Maybe you should just be awesome. the recurring guest we have for the post-debate analysis.
I would love it.
That's a good idea. I am completely in. And I just found you on Twitter. What?
I think I already follow you. Yeah.
That's actually how my channel got started. Like, I had enough people. It was really kind of interesting. I saw my first introduction to Yang. I knew Yang was running. I had read his book and everything. But every now and then I lurk on 4chan, and I noticed on 4chan there were all of these posts where they were taking Pepe the Frog, and suddenly it's Yang. And that fell away pretty quickly as 4chan pretty much shut it down. They're not interested. But I think that group moved over to Twitter, and we had a whole bunch of Yang Dank meme stash, for instance. It may have been a convert who moved over to Twitter, and they're less offensive. I can see actual growth happening from that darker corner of the internet. But the moment that I saw that on 4chan, I was like, something's happening here. And I made a Twitter account. It was actually a meme account. I had a picture of a panda on there, and I was being really provocative, talking about boomers and this and that, which obviously is not the kind of persona that I have on my my Twitter account now, but I've been able to see Yang's presence since earlier this year just explode. And it's been so interesting to see. Enough people reached out. They were like, hey, I love what you're talking about. I love these more consciousness expanding ideas, which is really what I think what I would love to be spoken about more in the zeitgeist of our country. The meaning of work, what it means to be fulfilled, in how we progress forward. That's the centrality of the things that you'll discover if you're following me or my YouTube channel. That's what I really want to try and drive forward as a discussion.
Yeah, Yang had a good line about that too. Also in his exchange with Sanders, one of the points he made about UBI versus federal jobs guarantee is that federal jobs guarantee doesn't really do much for a stay-at-home mom taking care of a kid with Asperger's or whatever. So I thought that was a good line. And Andrew Yang is our taco.
Yeah, the fact that he could bring that up in the conversation, I will forever consider Yang to be my taco, and I can't wait to see where he goes from here.
You guys are awesome.